Great. So, hi, we are delighted that you're here. My name is Lauren Gratton. I'm co-founder and chief community officer of Mission Driven Finance, as well as your moderator today. We have a large group, so you are all on mute until the breakout sessions later. Again, please use the chat liberally to ask any questions, celebrate tidbits that resonate for you, and share resources that you find helpful as well. If we don't get to all the questions in the chat, either in the main sessions or in our breakout rooms, we will follow up after the event. So speaking of the chat, as we get started, please introduce yourselves there. I believe my colleagues put a couple prompts just to let us know who you are. And we've got a couple of poll questions coming on screen momentarily so we can get a sense of who's in the room. And as you answer those, I will go over the flow for the day. Next. Great. So while you're filling out the polls, here's the rundown. I'm going to thank everybody who makes this possible. And since many of you are new to Mission Driven Finance, we'll share some context about who we are and why we wanted to start a fellowship program. My colleagues Shreya Sasaki and Carrie Stokes-Holst will unpack what this fellowship program looks like and what we've learned thus far. I'll come back on to moderate a fireside chat with these incredible fellows and take note during that time on who you'd like to meet. We'll be having, again, Monica Munn from WES Mariam Assefa Fund. She'll give a funder's perspective as we look ahead to cohort 2. And then the fun, possibly a bit of chaos, but the reason why you all came today is we will have 2 15-minute rounds of breakout rooms where you will get to meet the fellows or take a deeper dive with those that have been doing the program implementation if you're looking to expand or start a program yourselves. So with that, get started and thanking those that make this possible. This fellowship is here and alive, functioning well, thanks to incredibly hard work by our entire team, but notably Carrie, Shreya, and David. They've really put in a ton of thought, been really intentional about building this. And we're able to do that in large part because of our colleagues at Harder & Company Community Research and philanthropic partners who saw the potential of this pilot. Harder has been with us from the get-go, helping to build the initial concept, our blueprint for implementation, as well as facilitating a private community of practice for the fellows to reflect on the learnings that they're having in this program. Today, many of the philanthropic partners that I've mentioned, the San Diego Foundation, the Patricia and Christopher Wheel Family Foundation, and the Parker Foundation have helped us to also spread the word for today's showcase. We're joined as well by some of our good friends and community partners who recognize the need for representation and cultural sensitivity in finance. I wanted to specifically thank MAC Project and Hispanics in Philanthropy. For those that don't know, MAC Project is a nonprofit that shares our goals of economic opportunity, and they've got incredible programs in finance as well, helping to increase the Latinos in finance and help people on a banking track. And we've been sharing thoughts and resources with them, as well as 2 of our fellows working closely with some of their team. Hispanics in Philanthropy, likewise, eager for more representation in finance, and we are delighted to have them as partners. And finally, a big thank you to the folks behind the big logo, WES Mariam Assefa Fund, for the leap of faith to test this initiative. Without their lead commitment last year, we probably would not have launched on the timeline we did, with fellows starting in March and helping us to double our assets into community this year during a pandemic. So thank you all. This quote, "Learn the rules well so you can break them effectively," opens our fellowship field guide, a reference handbook to impact investing at Mission Driven Finance. So folks know straight out of the gate that we prize critical thinking and a focus on solutions. We know that the rules of finance have been out of reach for many, and we want to change that. So when I say we, and you're thinking about me saying we've doubled our assets into community, you may be wondering, what is mission-driven finance? And the long story short, we are an impact investment firm and certified B Corporation dedicated to building a financial system that ensures good businesses have access to sufficient affordable capital. We recognize that systems and policies have intentionally and unintentionally restricted access to the American dream, opportunity, health, education, fulfilling and rewarding careers, and thriving communities. We believe that we all do better when we all do better. So building more just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive structures is morally and economically the right choice. So at MDF, we use finance as a tool for change. We make investments that aren't happening, but should. To make that possible, we make it easy to invest in communities you care about, activating capital for great projects. And we strive to be trustworthy partners to all sorts of stakeholders. We started with a place-based fund here in San Diego, our headquarters, and really focused on closing access to capital in this missing middle above microfinance and below bank qualifications. And we've since been growing from building this full fund, soup to nuts, and being able to replicate those services to have more impact theses that we can support and sustain. And that's where the fellows have been instrumental, is helping to get capital out through those different products and platforms that we develop with deep impact at the core. So why did we want to start a fellowship program? This is going to have a couple clicks, so bear with me. So we start with wanting to focus on the end goal, inclusive economic opportunity, right? We believe we all do better when we all do better. And so we recognize that system that hasn't provided the same kind of access. And secondly, we need that access to capital for community projects in order for them to grow and thrive. But we can't have access to capital if we have a financial system, next click, financial system that's disconnected and doesn't understand or appreciate the cultural nuances of our whole community. And we see that having finally diverse talent in finance can be one of the ways that we can address that green circle. We started with an intentionally diverse team at Mission Driven Finance, largely because I know no other way to run a business. And we said, we're incredible and we don't fully reflect our community. To find the bold visions and innovative enterprises that aren't getting capital, but could really make a difference for the community, we need more people on our team with lived experiences in more communities. But we also didn't want to just have headcount or checkbox diversity where folks just come in and assimilate to a broken system. Instead, we want to be transformed as well by this process, to learn with and from the fellows together and be able to change the nature of finance. So now that you know a little bit about why we started this, I will pass it over to my colleague, Shreya Sasaki.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Lauren, for emphasizing why Mission Driven Finance started this fellowship program. Next, I want to highlight, as Lauren mentioned, what is the Community Finance Fellowship Program? In answering that question, the best way to describe what the program is really around changing the face of finance, increasing access to finance, and increasing the understanding of finance. So you might have seen in some of our messaging, simply put, if you think the financial system is perfect as it is, this isn't the place for you. We're here to have a better financial system, change who is operating in it, and increase who is accessing the capital they need to really make positive community impact. So really what this means, and I'll reiterate one of Lauren's points, is that to change the face of finance, we have to move beyond mandated headcounts and checkboxing, diversity, and really moving to a culture that fully values individual team members' life experiences. And in order to do this for the fellowship program, we really had to look at so lived, learned, and labored experiences. And this is important because it's not just for the fellowship program, it's for the entire company. And those are the values that we live by at Mission Driven Finance. With this diversity and experience, we have improved services, better products, improved decision making, and overall, again, we can inform our positive community impact. So when we looked at candidates for the fellowship program, the minimum educational requirement was a high school diploma or a GED, but we were really looking at that combined 5 years of lived, learned, and labored experience. Our strategy to recruit fellows was very inclusive, and it included partnerships with various nonprofits in our San Diego region and beyond that focus on positive youth development and really supporting first-generation college students. And in order to increase access to finance, this fellowship program supports that increased investment in communities that are lacking access to capital and wealth building. So fellows, they participate in a variety of community engagement and outreach activities. Of course, those have been modified in the pandemic. And they're really honing in on connecting with communities, whether that's based on sector, geography, culture, and other positive community strengths that the fellows want to build on through impact investing. And lastly, we want to change the understanding of finance. And this is both for our fellows, but all of you who are on the call today. Fellows are full-time paid employees of Mission Driven Finance, and they learn by doing. They are involved in all activities of the life cycle of an impact investment. This starts with sourcing deals, getting on the phone with potential borrowers, underwriting, due diligence, and then all the way through portfolio management. Our fellows are analyzing how investments are performing and reporting out to our investment committee. And for all of you who are on the call today, we want to help you push the dialogue further. We all know that internally as organizations, we are having these conversations on representation. So to that end, we are documenting our real world experiences so that this program can be replicated and scaled. And we're documenting our work in all phases of the program. So starting with ideation, outreach and recruitment, and then through launch, graduation, and evaluation. We're really developing a community-informed model that we want to replicate and scale. So if you want to learn more about how we're doing this, as Lauren mentioned, later in the agenda, we do have various breakout sessions, and I will be leading one along with our partner, Harder & Company, and Amy Ramos is here today, and she and I will facilitate a breakout session on the nuts and bolts of the fellowship program. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Stokes-Holtz. Carrie is the awesome supervisor of all 5 fellows, and she's going to touch on where are we now with the program, and then share some of the bright and blind spots that we've had so far in our launch.
Thank you. I'm Carrie, and I guess in talking about kind of where we are on the timeline, the fellows started, joined our team in March 2020, and they are getting ready to head in their final quarter of work, so their final 3 months of working with us in this capacity. And we are looking to raise for cohort 2 and hopefully get that one running and off the ground with a potential start date in June or July. And we are looking to start at kind of a different timeline as a part of some feedback that we got in launching this first cohort, and that we may remove some barriers and access for applicants if we better aligned with an academic calendar to kind of prevent some gaps in the system or overlap. And I guess now that we're 9-10 months in this, what have we learned? So what are some of the bright spots? I won't reiterate anything about all the effort that we did in our recruitment process, but I will say that what we have seen in terms of the applicants that we got and the amazing cohort that we ended up with is that that time, effort, and thought put into all the stages was incredibly worthwhile and was time well spent for us. In terms of other bright spots, one is the immediate bright spot of this cohort starting in March at a time of great unknown and fear at the beginning of a global pandemic. And because we had done all of the effort in recruiting and selecting them, we knew they were truly amazing and capable. And so we immediately trusted them to participate as full members of our team in a response to a global pandemic and put them in charge of meaningful work. And I think that was one of the smartest things our team ever did. And they really stepped up. Specifically, what they did is they began delving into understanding all the COVID release policies and programs coming federal, state, local, philanthropic spaces. And their research directly informed our company response to how we would support our own portfolio of businesses, as well as provided the context and framing that supported us in designing and funding a responsive fund design for COVID relief with local partners. And adaptability, again, the fellows started in March. They began onboarding this exact same week that our entire team of operations also shifted to a virtual environment. They signed up for an in-person, physical, on-the-ground, year-long program. And despite all of the challenges and all of the punches that were kind of thrown at them, and our team throughout the entire year have really stepped up to the plate, rolled with the punches, and have helped us serve the emerging needs and ever-changing needs of our community in this environment. So I have nothing but great things to say. In terms of blind spots, and these are things that we either shifted real time throughout this term of the fellowship, or we are really looking to improve for cohort 2. Things we've learned are that we value the soft skill development, particularly the confidence building and overcoming of imposter syndrome. We want to help support our fellows get through that. We believe these soft skills are as critical to cultivating fellows as future leaders as some of the technical skill development that we invest over the term of this. Particularly early on, we want to ensure for all of the cohorts that we ensure they know this is a truly safe space for them to make mistakes and be vulnerable as a part of the learning and growing process. And that when they come out of this, they know that they belong as professionals in the finance sector, because that's critical to changing the face of finance, is ensuring that all of the faces in the room feel confident and feel as though they belong. Another thing that we learned is we wanted to complement our learning by doing experience. We knew that we did not want to be an internship that people put on their resume, but when you ask them about what they did, they made copies and got coffee for the CEO. We want it to be truly valuable. And in learning by doing, particularly early on, we want to make sure that we pull back and, as members of the team, make sure we draw this explicit, clear connections for the fellows, that what they are doing connects directly to what they are learning. And we create that line for them so then they feel confident in speaking about the technical skills that they're developing, even if they don't know in the moment that they're doing it and they've learned that expertise. And then as well, we also shifted in expecting to be in a physical environment. We thought a lot of informal learning would come from bumping into each other in the hallway or having camaraderie from being in the same physical space. And we lost that a little with the virtual environment. And so we shifted about a quarter in with some great feedback from our current cohort of fellows to schedule more intentional and formal learnings with members of the team that the fellows did not necessarily have day-to-day contact with, in the form of a 5-on-1 learning session, so the fellows can really sit with an individual on our team and get a full download of who they are, what they do for the company, what their experience is, what their expertise is. And we found those incredibly valuable. Our team loves them, the fellows love them, and we hope to continue it and start early with the next cohort. And then lastly, in terms of blind spots, this is one area, community engagement, that we're particularly sad was lost a bit in the shift to virtual work. It's been challenging, and we've been unable to have the fellows really be physically boots on the ground in the community and meetings in the same way we intended when setting up the program. But like I said, they've been phenomenal and have adapted and been resilient. But we hope that we can continue to grow that aspect for future cohorts, and the fellows will share their learnings and be able to speak to how they've still managed and been able to make meaningful connections in this virtual environment. And then I think that's enough for me. I think, Lauren, we should get to the group.
Fabulous. Thank you, Shreya and Carrie, for that context. You could hear through the pieces that they were sharing that this is intended to be an early impact investing professional career. Right? Often we had this when we were doing recruitment, that folks heard fellowship and they thought, oh, so I should be 50, I should be taking a break, maybe a sabbatical, and this is a way to deepen our learning. And we said, not quite. That's really important, but there are excellent programs in the field for that. There are mid-career programs like RSF Social Finance's Integrated Capital Fellowship, now Boston Impact Initiative's Fund Building Cohort, and other programs that are addressing things like the Diverse Asset Managers Initiative. But there wasn't a lot for early impact investing professionals. As a field, we're still relatively young, so many of the formal programs are at exclusive institutions like Duke, MIT, University of Chicago, and Penn. And maybe because my co-founder David deeply prefers that learning by doing that both Shreya and Carrie referenced, that's what we set out to build. We set out to address that early piece of the pipeline for talent and do it really with a practical knowledge. As Shreya and Carrie noted, we did run an intentionally streamlined recruitment process. Don't need to just jump through hoops for the fun of it, and make it easy for folks to apply for the program. So we had an optional information session hosted on Zoom before we knew how this worked, and a simple online application, and just one joint interview with Shreya and me. That interview had a set flow by design, thanks to Harder & Company, but it had an introductory question meant to shake off the jitters, put candidates at ease, and reduce some of the funky power dynamics that are inherent to an interview. You know that we're working to dismantle systems of weird power, and so even in things as simple as how you are setting up your interview questions, you can work on these as well. So you will get to meet the fellows the same way that we did, with this mysterious first question. So team, get ready. I'm going to call you up in a second. Andrew, Essence, Louise, Crystal, and Benson, thank you so much for being here today. Let's get the most important question out of the way first. What is your favorite food and why? Andrew.
Hello, everyone. My favorite food happens to be a great piece of steak. I believe that a great piece of steak takes some time to marinate, some time to really get the juices flowing and get a good crust on it. And I feel like the same way that a steak takes time is the same way that we can see our financial ecosystem and how long it could take to get well done and be on the right path.
Fabulous. I haven't eaten steak in a long, long time as a vegetarian, but I can appreciate that simplicity. Essence.
Hello, everybody. My favorite food's tamales, mainly because they're tied in with childhood memories of being in the kitchen, helping my grandma. And also they're just, I feel like they're a great representation of community because it's never just one person in the kitchen. It's always aunts, grandparents working together and, gossiping and having a great time.
Thank you. Louise, what's your favorite food?
This is a sushi box. I like it because of the diversity of flavor and texture, and it kind of reminds me how I grew up in a very diverse Encanto community. Being able to have various experiences inform who I am as a person and kind of demonstrate, you know, what it means to be my authentic self, as well as appreciate others' unique experiences and skill sets.
Great. Crystal.
Okay, hi, my name is Crystal Sevilla. My favorite food is pizza. This picture is a little bit deceiving because I don't like mushrooms. Believe it or not, that is my mom's favorite food, and she tried to force it on me when I was little, and it just does not sit well with me anymore. But pizza is my absolute favorite comfort food. It just reminds me of being little, hanging out with family. Honestly, pizza was always the go-to because it satisfied everyone's cravings.
Agreed. Benson, how about you?
Hello, good afternoon, good morning. So my favorite food is, in general, is Indian food, but specifically chicken tikka masala. So I think I like this one specifically. I was born in East Africa, Uganda, and where I came from, we cook with a lot of flavorful ingredient. So when I came to the state, I feel like, Indian food is basically the version of what I used to eat as a young boy. So I like Indian food a lot.
Thank you. Great. So now that you've gotten to meet the fellows in terms of what their favorite food is, I'm going to take off the slides and just have a conversation, get to know them a bit. Again, this is where you want to take your notes on who do you want to follow up with. You're going to have two choices. You also have a choice of Shreya and Amy, but two choices in breakout rooms in a little while. So listen in for the kinds of elements that you really want to follow up on. So with that, I want to jump in and have a conversation with y'all. What made you decide to apply to this fellowship program? We just got hungry, thinking about food, 10:30 in San Diego. And I feel particularly hungry for change. So what do you want to use finance as a tool for change to affect? Let's go to Crystal first.
Hi, yes, so I joined Mission Driven Finance. Prior to Mission Driven Finance, I was working as an executive assistant in downtown. And I really joined Mission Driven Finance after seeing the major financial imbalances between my own community in Barrio Logan, San Diego, and the high net worth individuals that I was working with in downtown. This fellowship has been a great experience, and it has not only allowed me to grow my financial capabilities, but also form connections with my own community and really develop skills that I hope will be transferable to my next role.
Great. Who wants to jump in next? Why do you want to join this fellowship program? What made you apply to a thing that says, I don't think that finance is working perfectly?
Well, I can go next. So a little bit about me. Prior to being at Mission Driven Finance, I was in the legal space. I had full intentions of becoming a civil rights attorney, but after I realized that the legal field wasn't really the right fit for me, I set out to find another industry that could bring about the change that I wanted to address, such as systemic issues of poverty, poor education, and healthcare. And as I began to learn about impact investing, I was literally convinced that finance was a cure-all, that it can address the needs of marginalized individuals and that capital investments could profoundly transform disadvantaged communities. So initially, when I tried to kind of transition into the finance industry, I found it incredibly difficult, especially without any formal finance education or a background. So when I came across the Mission Driven Finance Fellowship application, I saw it as an opportunity to break into finance and really understand how to use it as a tool for change.
Great. And Benson, I know you've got a similar story, so why don't we go to you next?
Here we go. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I got it finally. Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Yeah, my story is similar to Louise, in the sense that before joining Mission Driven, I was more in that space of social work, working with nonprofit organization, supporting community, working with like welfare to work clients and refugee and immigrants. So, but always I've had passion to join the finance industry. But the challenge has always been, I never had any experience. I never went to school to learn finance. Of course, it's been so difficult for me to really get into the industry. So I feel like this fellowship came in the perfect time. But really the reason why I applied for the fellowship is because I came to the state as a refugee, and obviously as a refugee in this country, it's already difficult enough to find the ATM machine or understand how it works, let alone understanding the whole complexity in the finance industry. So I really had that desire to kind of go and be inside and learn that experience from within, and also use that experience to support the community, which I came from, obviously the refugee and immigrants who are having difficulty understanding finance and having access to capital.
Thanks. And I know, Andrew, want to hear from you as well. Got interesting motivations for wanting to join this fellowship.
Yes, of course, Lauren. So I joined Mission Driven Finance coming from Miami, Florida. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. So I kind of joined Mission Driven Finance right before what seemed to everybody as the end of the world with this global pandemic. So in my prior role, I worked at a social impact management consulting firm that worked on bridging the gap between small minority-owned businesses and large corporations through contracting. One of the biggest issues that I found in small businesses was access to capital. And I wanted to learn more about what could be done intentionally in finance to make impact investments. So I drove across country and joined Mission Driven Finance so that I can learn all the wonderful things about impact investing.
Lord, I was so worried about you on that drive. Glad you made it. I'm glad that we've gotten to meet a couple of times, socially distanced, but really glad to have Andrew come out here. Essence, how about you? What made you apply? It's a bit of a change for you.
Oh, I decided to apply to Mission Driven Finance because it seemed like the perfect place for professional development due to mission and value alignment. Before Mission Driven Finance, I never thought about using finance to aid underserved communities. Before coming to Mission Driven Finance, I was an undergraduate research fellow with the WES immigration policy. I was and still am passionate about immigration policy, but I decided to take a chance and see how else I could affect systemic change in underserved communities. Personally, I grew up in a family and community with little to no financial literacy, and that has been a huge barrier to creating financial stability and a plan for future savings. So I knew applying to this fellowship would help me understand finance and support my role in building resilience in underserved communities.
Thank you all for that. And so many great themes that are shared across you. And I'm sure that folks that are listening from the audience can see that Shreya and I had a very hard time when we were interviewing all of these fantastic candidates. They just blew us away, especially for an inaugural program. You don't know what you're going to get. And we were just amazed and surprised in a good way. Speaking of surprises, would love to hear from you guys. This 2020 has been full of them. This is not what we had anticipated for the program, as Carrie shared. So what was one thing that's surprising to you that maybe has changed a little bit of your thinking through this program? Let's see. You want to just jump off mute, whoever feels like talking?
Yes, I could go first. For me, it's definitely been the power of community. Coming from Miami, it's a minority majority city, but there's a lot of diversity, but the diversity is kind of causes a bit of friction. So it's more like a bento box that everybody's in their own little cubicle. But I've learned that here in San Diego, the power community is very true. And it feels more like a Chipotle bowl that gets all mixed up and you have extra guac. but it's amazing the power of community and how much passion there is to help the ecosystem as a whole here.
Thanks, Andrew. I just want to like call out that despite Andrew not being from San Diego, he's been asked to speak a couple of times for Spanish language entrepreneurs, and being able to have this kind of connectivity. And even though, you know, he grew up with a lot of Cubans and Nicaraguans, being able to connect with more of the Latinx community and diaspora, pretty cool. And I also cannot do that myself. So really, really glad to, again, be growing our team and changing the understanding of finance. Essence, what's a surprise for you?
I think one of the big surprises was how much my goals have changed since joining mission-driven finance. Again, before I wanted to work in immigration or even international relations, but community outreach, you know, engaging with local business owners and even local officials showed me that it's just as impactful and rewarding to change people's lives here. As I mentioned, I was born and raised here in San Diego, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of, you know, housing and homelessness, education, racial inequality, and climate change. You know, there's a lot of value in helping your fellow neighbors, and I intend to continue doing that here.
Crystal, you're also a native San Diegan. Do you have shared thoughts with Essence? Other different surprises?
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest surprise was actually this concept of finance as a tool for change. So as I mentioned, prior to this, I worked as an executive assistant. My view of finance was very small, and that was that finance could be used as a tax benefit or retirement and to invest in stocks, right? And when I came to mission-driven finance, it's just been incredible to see that we can use investor capital and philanthropic dollars to really help the small businesses in our own backyard. And I say our own backyard because I am also a native to San Diego. I was born and raised here. I mostly identify with my community of Barrio Logan, which is like on the south side of San Diego, it borders downtown. But I've been very lucky to help, be working on a project that is looking to bring some affordable housing units to this area, which are some areas that I'm incredibly passionate about.
Great. And then last of our San Diego natives, Louise.
Yeah, so a surprise for me was realizing finance didn't have to be intimidating, or wasn't as intimidating as I thought it was initially. I think for a lot of people of color, they don't want to enter the finance industry because they think spreadsheets and incalculable numbers, and that's just not the case. I mean, for me, with the guidance of senior management and more experienced fellows at Mission Driven Finance, I was able to learn about the nuance of finance, but hone in on the basics, such as understanding how to conduct a financial statement analysis and business model analysis, things that are needed to kind of move forward in pursuing and initiating capital investments. So now I feel way more confident in my ability to articulate the risk and benefits associated with loans and capital investments, and, you know, look forward to applying that analysis to future career opportunities.
Incredible. Benson? Let's see if this.
Yeah, got it. I think for me, the biggest surprise is also having to shift my expectation a little bit. And part of that is because of the COVID-19, of course. So coming into the fellowship, I really had this idea that I was going to interact with a lot of small business owners in the community and nonprofit organization, because I really enjoy working with people, and I love to meet people in person and strike a conversation. That part has been lost because of COVID-19, but also really giving more credit to Mission Driven in general, having to redesign the whole process, the whole system to accommodate this fellowship. So I think that's really a big surprise for me.
Yeah, that has been a big surprise for us all, but every single one of you has been so helpful in building community, even despite all of these challenges of being able to access them. You know, Benson has joined me on a webinar to our refugee health community. We've done other education sessions together. Louise has done outreach with the nonprofit community. and figuring it out as other people were scrambling and figuring it out when you all joined Mission Driven Finance. Then we settled into a rhythm fairly quickly in being able to reach those that were hard to reach. So thanks for that. Now, many of you touched on career goals that you have, and we've got a lot of great folks in the audience that are eager to hire some of you. So I want to hear, what are those career goals? You have short or long-term aspirations that you want to share about. Benson's still off mute, so let's hear from Benson.
Yeah. So I think for me, my long-term career goal has always been wanting to become a business consultant. But then also, you know, as I try to understand what business consulting is all about, it requires like being, developing certain expertise in the area of businesses and all that. So when I say long-term, I'm talking about 10, 15 years from now. But you know, looking at my immediate career goal is really to get into the financial industry, specifically like in the impact investment or working with the investment banking. So I could be able to learn more about finance and have that strength to support business in that capacity of linking them with capital.
Well, you're certainly dressed for it. Benson's always showing us up. Who else? What are your career goals that you have?
I can go next. For me, my focus right now is really on augmenting the qualitative and quantitative skills I developed over the course of this fellowship. I'm actually in the process of applying for business school, but still very open to pursuing professional opportunities and impact-based financing. For me, it's really important that, you know, no matter what I do next, that I continue to develop custom capital solutions for small businesses and nonprofits, continue conducting business model analysis and finding more opportunities to invest in overlooked communities.
Awesome. I know I talk to you guys like every day, but each time I'm just re-inspired. I'm hearing these elements of what we set out to do, of use finance as a tool for change. And that's what you're fired up about, which is fantastic. So Crystal, how about you?
Great. So I would actually really like to continue down the road of impact investing. This is a field that has just been extremely rewarding. Again, deploying quick capital to communities in need has been incredibly rewarding and unlike any other job I've ever had. In terms of next steps, I would love to continue to be like a financial analyst with a specialization in impact investing. However, in the long term, my goals have always been to promote financial literacy in low-income communities. So I hope that down the road, whether that's 10 or 15 years from now, I can tie in all of the skills that I've learned in this industry and put that to use.
Great. I'm going to tell you, you don't have to wait 10 or 15 years. You can start sharing your knowledge soon, even now. Essence, hear from you.
Well, my goals are really similar to that of Louise and Crystal. In the near future, I would like to continue working in the impact investment space, and for another year or two to continue growing my skills as an impact and financial analyst before applying to grad school. I currently have my eyes set on USD's Joan B. Kroc School of Peace Studies, where I'd like to pursue a Master's of Arts in Social Innovation. In terms of long-term goals, I don't have a specific position or title in mind, but I want to continue working in the impact investment space. I see myself working for an organization whose mission is serving the community and who's relentless and uncompromising in their pursuit of impact. I see myself helping others to better understand their own financial literacy and work towards their goals in a realistic and attainable fashion.
So good. Andrew, want to take us through the end?
Yes, of course. So for me, my short-term goals are really to continue in impact investing and more so in intentional finance, whether it be helping small businesses or affordable housing projects. I would love to continue to develop skills and more framing there. As for a long-term goal, one day I wish to have my own impact investment fund and continue to invest into the communities that need it most.
So rad. Literally every day, I'm just excited. Thank you for that. So with hearing those goals, both your short and long-term ones, let's talk about one of the projects that you've worked on or something that you've seen specifically at Mission Driven Finance. Again, acknowledging that 2020 has been a funky year, but what's something that you've worked on that you've been particularly proud of and think that that's been helping you to advance your career goals? Context for everybody who's on the call is that we have an allocation of $5.2 million from the San Diego Foundation and Alliance Healthcare Foundation for COVID responsive nonprofit loans that are going out at 0% interest. And that $5.2 million is largely being generated. All of the deals are analyzed by these 5 folks on this team. So they're hard at work moving money into the community in great ways. So just wanted to give one of the biggest projects that we've been working on a little bit of context for those that are new to Mission Driven Finance. But let's see, Crystal, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about a project that's meaningful to you, what you're excited about.
Of course. So I have 2. One has not been approved, so I don't know how much of that can be disclosed. But that one is essentially us funding a nonprofit who is hoping to bring 12 affordable units to Barrio Logan, which, as we know, is San Diego overall is in critical need of housing. So I think this is just such a great opportunity for the Barrio Logan community. But in addition to that, something that I can speak more to is the small business nonprofit loan program that we ran in coordination with the San Diego Foundation. That was one where we were able to quickly deploy capital to small businesses who were going through some sort of financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, but we're still providing immensely critical support to overlooked communities. And it was incredibly rewarding to see that capital almost fly out the door and be put to very good use.
And I know a lot of people have agreed with you. We've gotten, well, for those that stick around, we have a few testimonials from folks, but anonymous surveys to borrowers saying, working with this person or this fellow was the highlight of the process. So doing a great job in that. Louise, what's one thing that you've enjoyed working on?
I want to kind of augment what you said and Crystal said in regards to the small business nonprofit loan program. I think for me more personally, you know, I grew up experiencing the firsthand benefits of nonprofit community-based services, such as after-school programs and mentorship and nutritional assistance programs. And throughout this fellowship, I've had the opportunity to research the capital challenges nonprofits face in trying to deliver these crucial services to at-risk communities. And so through like the development and strategizing of the small business nonprofit loan program, I've had the opportunity to combine that research as well as my lived experience to develop impact-based metrics that really evaluated the depth and breadth of some of those services, really articulate the value of those investments and the impact that it was initially inevitably going to create in those communities. And then so far, I've learned kind of like, you know, how we think about finance needs to be transformed to kind of consider some of the cultural implications that prevent overlooked communities from meeting financial metrics in general to begin with. And looking ahead, I kind of want to continue doing some of that same work.
So before we move on to another person's favorite project, can you share just where you're saying we need to change finance and make it more culturally relevant for these communities that you're seeking to serve? What's an example of that?
For me, I'm going to talk about my community. So statistically, San Diego's District 4 retains some of the most culturally rich communities, but lacks residentially owned businesses that reflect its diversity and economic potential. And in a recent retail analysis done by the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation, it stated that residents in District 4 had significant aggregate purchasing power, but they make up the majority of their purchases outside of District 4. So what that means is like within that year, about like $300 million in investments went outside of the district towards groceries, restaurants, apparel stores, and that's money that could have gone into District 4. And it could have gone to those communities and served those broader needs that needed to be met. And so for me, trying to get capital into those spaces is very important for me so that we can continue or find ways to reinvest in ourselves.
Amazing. Let's see. Now my view changed. Who hasn't talked? Don't jump in with your favorite example.
Yeah, I can go. I think for me, my favorite part of this fellowship has been having the privilege to speak with the business owners on the phone, like especially at the beginning part. I love that opportunity to hear their story and how they connect those stories to numbers and how they see together the stories plus numbers together is equal to the impact that they want to create in the community. So that part has really been very, very interesting to me. But specifically, you know, as Lauren mentioned, we work on this nonprofit loan program, and having the opportunity to work with the Somali Family Services, a nonprofit organization here in San Diego. It was really very interesting because, you know, understanding different business structure, culture in that community, and how they see finance. So it's really been meaningful for me during this fellowship.
Thanks, Benson. Well, now my view is changing again. I think hearing from Andrew on a favorite project.
Yes, of course. So one of my favorite projects amongst many that are my favorite, but one of the ones that I would say is my favorite is a real estate development that is targeting 47 families and workforce middle income housing. This comes for the need of middle income housing. This need is something that, you know, can turn into wealth creation for first-time home buyers. Through this project, I've learned many things that have to deal with the real estate sector. And one of the things that this specific project is aiming for is to be a pilot for more affordable housing developers to get investors that can see that these are non-concessionary returns and that doing good can also mean that you're doing good yourself financially.
Yeah, real estate is like next level finance understanding. So amazed that you've gotten exposure, you and Crystal in particular, to those kinds of transactions. Essence, you've had a little bit of a different experience, a fellowship within a fellowship. Can you tell us a little bit about this project that you've been working on?
Yes, so my favorite project has been working on this Community Real Estate Investment Trust, or CREIT, with David and Laura Cohn. About a year ago, Mission Driven Finance was given, can you please give me a second?
She has a very active husky that we may hear in the background.
Yes, the joys of working remotely. So about a year ago, Mission Driven Finance was asked by the San Diego Foundation to look into how impact investing could help get capital into the early childhood education space, as well as to help build resilience within that community. But I'm very passionate about connecting capital there because parents are always desperate to find affordable quality childcare, and it's particularly difficult for single parents and low-income families. And so connecting capital with ECE would benefit children, parents, and providers who are often women of color. But it's just been exciting to be a part of the team. As Lauren mentioned, it's sort of a fellowship within a fellowship where David and Laura and I are currently in the Promise Ventures Studios Fellowship. And it's been an exciting experience to try to build out this model to help early child care and education. But overall, it's just been an exciting experience to be in the room where it happens, to be a fly on the wall and get to meet movers and shakers in the ECE space, as well as impact investing. And I would not have had the opportunity to learn from them if it weren't for this fellowship. So we're really happy to be here.
Great. Thank you all for sharing those examples. I know that I could sit and talk to you forever. I've done it. You are used to one-on-one time with Lauren, but I want to make sure that other people get to meet you too. So I'm going to wrap up our fireside chat, folks, hopefully you've been able to hear elements of conversations that you'd like to continue and pursue with the 5 fellows or with Shreya. But in the meantime, I'd like to bring Monica Munn up from WES Mariam Assefa Fund. Monica has been such an incredible partner, not just a funder, but a thought partner, a convener, a connector of other ideas and resources. It's been a pleasure to work with Monica and the whole team at WES. So I wanted to just hear Monica and funder's perspective on why did, like, you may have seen why to support this program from hearing directly from the fellows, but hearing from her what she saw in this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for having me here today, and many of my other colleagues from the World Education Services Mariam Assefa Fund I know are also on the line. I mean, what a hard act to follow. I mean, if it's not obvious why one should support a program like this and these 5 amazing individuals after hearing from them directly, I'm not sure what else will tell that story, but I'm happy to sort of run back in time and share a little bit about how we came together, the mission-driven finance team and WES, and why even in its earliest kernel of an idea, we were just so excited about this. So just as a tiny bit of context for those that don't know World Education Services, or WES as we call ourselves, we are a 46-year-old social enterprise that has been working to support international students, immigrants, and refugees since we were established in pursuing their own educational or professional goals. And one of the newest ways in which we work towards that mission is through our philanthropic arm, the WES Mariam Assefa Fund, which launched just about 18 months ago now. And our North Star is supporting catalytic leaders and organizations that are working to ensure immigrants and refugees can thrive. They are accessing the jobs they want and building lives that they aspire to, and ensuring more broadly too, that they're participating in equitable, inclusive, and just workplaces, communities, and economies. So really working at both the individual level, as well as thinking about that systems change. And as a funder, we can do that through a few ways. We are a grant maker and an impact investor, so we provide capital and support amazing organizations like Mission Driven Finance. We also really think a lot about backing solutions that are worker-centered, putting workers at the table, redesigning the table to ensure that workers are informing not just the design of solutions, but their implementation and ownership. And third, backing proximate leaders. I love the phrase that y'all use, the lived, learned, and labored experiences, really thinking about that holistically and ensuring those that have that knowledge are at the table in shaping what the solution are and what the future should look like. So that's a little bit who we are, and in the 18 months that we've been around, Mission Driven Finance was one of our first 5 inaugural grantee partners back in September 2019, what probably feels like a lifetime ago to all of us. These days we have over 30 partners here in the US and have deployed $7.5 million in capital since we got up and running. But you know, it's always great to go back to where you started, even if it wasn't that long ago. And you know, like so many fortuitous things in the world, we were connected to Lauren and David through a fellow funder, Funders Talk. That's one thing we're really good at. And so they said, we hear you're focusing on immigrant and refugee communities. We hear you're thinking about sort of equity and philanthropy a little bit differently. Y'all should just chat. These are amazing thought partners. I feel like there's going to be some kindred spirits there. Why don't you have a conversation? And so as a lot of beautiful and fortuitous things emerge, we had a conversation, we had a few conversations. And what became really evident was a few things. One, when we got to know the Mission Driven Finance team, there was just such a strong values alignment. You know, and I think as funders, we spend a lot of time vetting certain ideas or projects and getting into the weeds on those. And there's a time and a place for that kind of due diligence. But even before you go down that route, understanding who is on the other side of that table, what are their aspirations, what are their values, how does that align with yours? Really thinking at the human and the enterprise level is so important before moving down the funding rabbit hole. And it became very clear from those early conversations that the Mission Driven Finance team has a whole range of amazing initiatives that they are leading, but that they also were thinking really differently about how to change the face of finance. And second, in parallel with this, as we were thinking about places to focus our first round of funding back in 2019, we were hearing from leaders in the immigrant and refugee integration field, from philanthropy, impact investors saying, what would it look like to be investing in talent from an early stage? We know no change is possible without people. And so we really need to think about ensuring that those with the various and diverse array of lived, learned, and labored experiences are at the table in critical sectors. I think we think a lot about leadership development. We see a lot of amazing programs focusing on this in social enterprises. So we were looking at, say, Echoing Greens programs and feeling deeply inspired by that work. But then saying, okay, well, what about some of these key sectors that determine where money goes, what policies get made, what solutions advance? How are we ensuring that the individuals shaping those decisions, making those decisions, reflect immigrant and refugee communities? And so in our conversations with Lauren, David, and the team, the fact that they were already having this idea around thinking through in a much more holistic way what it would look like to back talent and not just impact individuals' lives, but really transform a sector, and through the work that they do, transform communities. And so it just felt like the sweet spot on so many dimensions. And so, Lauren said earlier, as she was reflecting on some of their work, about the learning by doing approach. And, that was definitely, when we were having some of our early conversations, something that very much jumped out as a sort of a similar approach that we both take. And so in our funding conversations, we laid out a handful of learning questions. So you see them here on the slide. And this was really what sort of shaped our collaboration. I mean, it was a kernel of an idea, but the potential for both impact and outsized change was so clear from the vision that they shared. And, and I think the way we sort of approached it as a funder was said, here's some things we'd like to learn. You're going to be one of our first grantee partners potentially. So we want to learn alongside you through the work that you do. We know things, whatever you put in this proposal right now, odds of it looking exactly the same by the time this grant is coming up on its end, highly unlikely. And, we did not know there was a global pandemic around the corner. But I think understanding what do we hope to learn together was a key part of that relationship building process. So, a few of the kinds of questions that we talked through together and used to sort of structure the funding, you can see here. I mean, I think a big one for us was, how do we build and support immigrant leadership capacity in key sectors? So obviously mission-driven finance, really looking at it from a financial systems. And as you heard, from each of the 5 fellows, that can look and feel like a lot of different things. Yes, absolutely. Some folks might want to go and build careers in impact investing, but also working with small businesses, working in more traditional finance and investment management. All of that is incredibly important. I think about my own lived experiences, having worked in both private sector banking and then in impact investing, and making having no technical knowledge of that coming out of my undergrad, but yet having a fair amount of privilege as a white woman with credentials, a native English speaker, I still faced a lot of hurdles making that jump. And so I think as we try and unpack what does it look like to dismantle those barriers in multiple parts of the financial services sector, impact investing has them too. Just because we're focused on social impact doesn't mean they don't exist. Understanding what it takes for different people with different lived experiences is so essential. And we loved how, we know people have multiple identities. And so the fact that the mission-driven finance team was thinking about this program from a very intersectional lens was really exciting to us. We knew there was a lot we could learn, even though we have this sort of laser focus on immigrant and refugee communities in particular. We were also really excited to learn about, as you see down here, the different skills and networks and supports. Louise, when she was talking about some of the things that have helped her succeed in her career, understanding what does this look like for different people. And I loved when we were doing when y'all, Carrie, I think you were sharing the blind spots, there were things you sort of knew, different kinds of technical skills, different types of networking opportunities, but then there were other complex skills that are just as important, and how to build those in ways that make sense for each person. And also doing that in a cohort level too. How do you scale that? And so I think the learnings on both fronts are so valuable from this. And then the last learning question that we really had was around looking at promising practices. We knew coming into this, there were going to be 5 amazing individuals, but this was the start of something hopefully that will continue to grow for many, many years to come. And so both what are promising practices that mission-driven finance can continue to extend into year 2, 3, and many, many more of this fellowship program as they scale it. But also too, what can we as a funder take back to our own practices as we think to continue on how can we be better at embedding and living equity, inclusion, and diversity in our own practices. We also are impact investors, so there's a lot we can learn from each of the fellows and from mission-driven finance in this. So, you know, a little bit over a year and some change in, I mean, I feel like these learning questions and probably so many more, Lauren, you know, we take it back every day. We're so privileged to have Benson join a board meeting with us recently and share some of his wisdom with our fund committee members. And you know, this I think is the exact sort of sweet spot in our minds of both investing in people, but also building the systems and the structures that we need to sort of see the change that we hope for the long term. So we're just so thrilled to be here. And thank you all so much for joining, and hopefully others are equally excited about this. And I'm gonna stop now because I'm also between y'all and some amazing breakout groups with each of the fellows. So I wanna make sure you get to spend as much time with them as possible. So back over to you, Lauren, and thanks again, everyone. Thank you to the fellows so much.
Thank you so much, Monica, for that. She's right. We have a long, long list of learning questions. If you would like to see it, it's 1 page, bullet point listed of all the things that we are really intentional and thoughtful about. How can we learn about this? How can we also be exploring for this as we're executing this program? What else can we lift up? And where Monica was sharing that last learning question on what are promising practices, you know, our intention is to run another cohort. This is the plan for us to launch, as you heard from Carrie, but also to share the playbook, to have sessions like this, to do writing. If we go back on the conference circuit, being able to share what does it look like to do this justice, equity, diversity, inclusion work in practice? What does it really mean from an implementation standpoint? Because we can run this program with 5, maybe a few more people each year, and that is a great change. It is not sufficient for us to change the whole field. So we invite everyone to join us in building this work. Things that you can do, you can reach out to the fellows. You'll be getting their contact information to have one-on-one conversations with them. You'll also get to meet them, of course, right now in breakout rooms. You can think about enhancing your existing leadership development programs, internship, fellowship, or other. Of course, join our community. And as we get started on a next cohort, invite you to support that as well.
Each ask a great question we all missed.
I asked about the fellows' mental health and thoughts of self-care, and how are we thinking about the program with respect to those issues. Sorry, they're working on the roof, so I'll mute, but it was about self-care and mental health, and how do we put that into programming to ensure that they're ready to go, and then also how do we address any inequities that are found, you know, for them to be able to make it to work or do the things that they need to do that certain communities don't have.
That is such a great question. I'm going to ask Carrie to talk about.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think I don't know the current status of all the fellows' mental health, but I will say we have really worked to try to provide opportunities, continuous touch points, so that you can check in on a regular basis, because it's a lot harder if you haven't had a touch point to reach out to someone you haven't talked to in weeks, especially if you're not seeing them in person, and say, I'm having a hard time, right? So I think providing regular touch points has been really great for me to get a sense of kind of where the fellows are, what's on their plate. Weekly vibe check, at least, for sure. But I would love, the fellows' thoughts on how that's going and how they're feeling.
I guess to Carrie's point, it's been really helpful to be able to have like one-on-one check-ins with our supervisor, but also to know that anybody on the team, you know, is open to talk, even if they're like scheduled to the teeth, you know, just to find a little bit of time, and everyone has been made it really clear that they're there for us in any capacity. And we've also been able to like schedule a few social distancing events where we just meet up at the park and you know, relax, not necessarily talk about work, but you know, just whatever challenges that are, you know, going on in our lives, and sharing tips on how to, I guess, combat like stress and anxiety that has come out of this year. And yes, as Carrie said in the chat, a lot of us are pet parents, so we're always bringing them along or talking about them.
Oh, Nancy does a great job with trivia. Thank you both, Essence and Carrie, for those comments on mental health. You know, part of these things I shared earlier, I'm going to break down these barriers, these power dynamics throughout, getting all sorts of the things that we do to build a culture that lets you bring your whole self to work, even if that whole self is not feeling great today. We also, I don't know if David's going to get mad at me for saying this on a recorded conversation, we also have an unlimited PTO policy. And so really letting people tell us what works well for you. And that is partially because we don't want to track PTO. We don't want to feel like we've got a big brother society that's like, did you use your hours? But also letting people think about what makes sense, and not having a culture of intimidation where some that have unlimited PTO, nobody uses it. We're using it liberally. And so that's a really important part of being able to have balance in this pandemic and all the time. Sounds like he's not mad at me for saying that on this recorded line. Okay, all good. That we're normalizing taking time for yourself, being clear about what your personal needs are. We've got parents on the team too who are like, listen, kids are going back to school in the living room. I'm going to be moderating how much I'm available because that's the reality. So we just make sure that everybody has this ability to be authentic of what kind of bandwidth they've got and being able to meet them where they're at. Yes, David, not work-life balance, it's work-life integration. Woof. Any other final questions or good thoughts that really resonated for you in the breakout room or main session? I think you all have the power to unmute yourselves if you would like to share a thought.
I just want to say this has been very uplifting and inspiring, and it's so amazing to connect with people as if we were in person. It's like I feel so warm and full because I'm getting fed by you guys. You're inspiring me, and I'm like, oh my God, like we have a team. There's a team out there. So this is cool. This is a really cool team experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Look at all that, these hearts and claps and thumbs up. Any other final thoughts, and we can let people go back to their merry, very full December days.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Esther. Esther is head of WES World Education Services, and again, another incredible thought partner. Just really grateful to have you join us today.
So such inspiring work.
Wonderful. So I have been accused of catting, which is to fill the container. You know, a cat can shrink down into a tiny box, or if it's given a big box, will fill the whole thing. If I'm given the whole container, I will take it. But I'm going to not do that today. I'm going to let you have a 7-minute gift of time and just really, really thank you for showing up today, for being part of this conversation, and also lastly, for participating in honoraria. I want to normalize that as a behavior too, that we are not extracting from the fellows' experiences, but that we are compensating them for the incredible knowledge and experiences that they've shared. It's exciting. I think as of this morning, the last I looked, we were close to $1,500 contributed. So that's a $300 honorarium per fellow. And it's really thanks to the generosity of this community that sees the power of this program. So thank you again. Happy December. Enjoy the rest of your busy schedules. And thank you for spending so much time with us today.